How we do this, we are the truest. Got these fangs super sharp, your shit toothless. Cold-hearted, yeah we ruthless. All the ghouls in the cut, let's get ghoulish. In the graveyard, acting foolish. Finna dance with the devil to no music. Cold-hearted, yeah we ruthless. All the ghouls in the cut, let's get ghoulish.
Hello and welcome to a podcast called Ghoulish. I am Max Booth, an undead host, and I have two dogs fighting each other at my feet. There's no controlling them. This is just what they do. They fight. If they sleep, they eat, they poop. That's what they do. That's what dogs do. That's what humans do. It's what frogs do. On today's episode of the podcast, I have another live episode from the Ghoulish Book Fest that just happened last week in downtown San Antonio. Ghoulish Book Festival, a fest that myself and my partner, Molly Michelle, threw. How do you throw a fest? I can throw that fest as I don't know. Fuck, I'm tired. Anyway, I'm not gonna edit that. This is just my state of mind at the moment. On today's episode, we will talking about cryptids with Susan Snyder moderating, LJ Joseph, Laurel Hightower, Victoria Nations, and Johnny Compton as the panelists. It's a good spooky time. I was just listening to it. At one point, Susan Snyder implies, because we scheduled both a cryptids panel and a fake monsters panel, that I must believe cryptids are real. And I am going to confirm right now she is 100% correct. Not only do I believe they are real, I know they are real. I won't get into that because I'm not on this panel. So you'll just have to let that little mystery live a little bit longer, folks. I'm excited. The audio is okay, pretty okay on this. There was one mic we had where the volume just fucking sucked, unless you were basically deep throating it. So it's a little low. I tweaked some of the gain on it a bit, so you will obviously notice when someone is using that mic. Calm down. I've tweaked some of it, so I think it's okay to listen to. It's not bad enough to just delete. I think you will find something to enjoy out of it. If you dig the podcast, consider leaving a review. Yeah, I think that's all I have. We have books for sale at ghoulishbooks.com. We have a Patreon at patreon.com/PMM Publishing. That's pretty much it. Go buy a book, maybe. Go fill a spooky press on Patreon, and go buy the books from those who are on this panel. They put a lot of hard work into this, and I appreciate it. Now, let's talk about some cryptids, baby.
All right, hi. Welcome to the second panel of the first Ghoulish Book Festival. So this is Cryptids! And I will be moderating. My name is Susan Snyder. I am a horror poet, write short fiction, and I have a book, Encyclopedia Sharks Botanica, which is all about shark movies. All of that's available downstairs, Madness Heart Press. So let's get started by having our panelists introduce themselves, do a quick and nasty little bio for us before we dive into the topic at hand. So let's get started with Johnny over here.
Oh, goodness. I was hoping somebody else would go
No.
first. I've never done a panel before, so I'm super anxious. But my name is Johnny Compton, local San Antonio author. Horror stories, horror short fiction for a while, and my first novel is being published by Tor Nightfire next year. It's called The Spite House, and I'm really just grateful to Max for squeezing me in.
I am Laurel Hightower. I am a horror author. I have written Whispers in the Dark, Crossroads, which is the most depressing book in the free world, and just came out with Below, which is my take on the Mothman legend, which is why I'm on this panel, I would assume.
We're having mic problems on this side of the table. It's a sign. I blame the cryptids. My name is Victoria Nations. I write short fiction. I write gothic horror, and I write about weird monsters. And I have books for sale down on the table downstairs as well.
Hey, so I'm Rhonda Jackson Garcia, aka RJ Joseph. I write a lot of different things. So I'm primarily an academic and creative writer, writing about and within the horror genre and about pop culture. And I have books downstairs also available, and I'm really happy to be here.
All right, welcome, folks. I promised I won't talk about the existence of megalodons for the next hour. I swore I wouldn't do that. I mean, we can if you want. Okay, no.
At least for a half hour. Right?
Half an hour,
Okay.
yeah. Okay, so, well, I mean, Laurel, you kind of just hit on my first question to you guys is, have you ever written about a cryptid? And why did you choose that cryptid? So I'm going to go ahead and put you on the spot and get it going from there.
Okay, yeah, so I have written a book about Mothman, and I have the t-shirt to prove it, and like I said, I don't know if this is as weird as wearing the band t-shirt, but I don't care because I've never been cool in my life, so I don't care. So yeah, I chose Mothman just because he's such an intriguing element.
No, she was pointing at
okay.
that.
Do I need to get into
No,
it?
there's an ominous hum.
There is an ominous
As soon as
hum.
we started
I
talking
think it's the
about
other
it.
mic. Yeah.
Is it this one?
Yeah.
I had concerns that Indrid Colt had figured out we were here, and he was protesting. But yeah, I chose Mothman just because I feel like he's such an interesting cryptid. He's such a cool element to include in something. And I'd been wanting to write something about him for a little while after I read John Keel's book. But I didn't want to just regurgitate the same, legends and the things that had already been said. So I kind of waited until I had my own story to tell about it. But I think what I really like about Mothman is the ambiguity of it. I think if we ever sat down and had a conversation with Mothman and stuff made sense, that it would be boring. So.
All right, how about you, Johnny? Have you ever written about a cryptid?
I have. Nothing that's been published or seen the light of day, but
Still counts. Yeah, cryptids,
yeah,
yeah.
it's kind of
It's a
kind of
cryptid,
fitting, right?
Cryptid book, yeah.
Keep it mysterious. But yeah, I wrote about the Jersey Devil, which I've been fascinated with when I was a kid. It's like second grade or so. There was a book by an author named Daniel Cohen called Monsters You've Never Heard Of. There's actually two different books with that same title, but the one I read when I was a kid was by Daniel Cohen, and it had a strange depiction of the Jersey Devil that doesn't really match any of the depictions that have been described on the cover. A lot more monstrous, but reading about it just fascinated me. So then when I really got serious about trying to write prose fiction in my early 20s, that was one of the first things I wrote about was the Jersey Devil. And since then I've been primarily fascinated with that, but a lot of others, a lot of just varied types of cryptids, and even the older lore, before they kind of started calling them cryptids, the fearsome critters of the Northwest, whenever they were doing the logging and stuff like that, and those kind of things. I've had a long-term fascination with that.
Very cool. Yeah, actually the term cryptid wasn't coined until 1983. Yeah, before that they were just called, fearsome monsters or whatever. So we have a separate monster panel. And it says fake monsters. So clearly Max thinks cryptids are real. So wherever Max, wherever you are. Yeah, I believe. Let's go over here. What about you ladies?
Can you hear me okay if I don't touch the microphone? Okay, awesome. I've actually written about Bigfoot. I am from Florida, and we are not known for having Bigfoot, but a couple years ago, somebody told me an extremely earnest story about a whole interaction that a family that had been in the area for a very long time would interact with the local Bigfoot colony, and they were completely sincere, and then it was just that connection of the humans interacting with the Bigfoot I found really inspiring. So yes, I have a short story out there called The Monster of Palliser Creek.
Yeah, so as a native Texan, chupacabras are in our regular lexicon. Like in my house, we talk about chupacabras all the time. My husband and I had this experience with some type of creature on one of these back Texas roads some years ago, and I didn't think it was a chupacabra that I could write about, right? Because he couldn't do the stuff I needed him to do in the story. And so in the story, the creature is a Wendigo, which is another one of my, and I guess we could kind of debate if that's a cryptid or not. But, I think it's a cryptid, and I like Wendigos. So I have written a Wendigo story.
Yeah, so I'm a total geek. So I looked up the Oxford Dictionary, definition of a cryptid, just so we know, just so we're all on the same page. An animal whose existence or survival to the present day is disputed or unsubstantiated. Okay. So that opens up the door for the megalodon. I'm just saying, because it did exist at some point, but the survival to the present day might be a little bit. Okay, they don't exist, but whatever. I'll get over it. So actually, that was one of my things. I was going to ask if any of you guys have had an encounter with a cryptid. You say you might have.
Oh my gosh, yes. So we were, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Houston area, but there we still have a drive-in theater, right? And so we were coming from the drive-in, and our car lights hit this thing, right? And we were looking at it. My husband's a truck driver, so he sees all kind of critters on the road. He's like, that's not like a bear, or there's no reflection from the eyes. And so we just kind of sat there looking at each other and this thing, and then it just kind of went off, and we're like, oh, okay. I mean, is it following us? That was my concern, was we don't need it to go back to the burbs with us. We need to leave it in the woods out here. And so when we talked about it, though, we've never been able to figure out what that thing was. He saw more of the details than I did. I saw clearly a head, there were eyes, but I mean, there was not a bear. We don't have bears right there like that. It was too big to be a raccoon or an armadillo, a possum, so it was just weird. And of course, because my brain works that way, I'm like, of course we would experience a monster. Of course I have to write this monster. But it was the craziest thing, because my husband is not given to fancy like I am. He's very, very grounded, because I need that person, because I'm all here. So if it had been just me, I'd have been like, yeah, you just made that up, and girl, no, you're tripping. But he saw it, and I was like, oh no, and he admits to seeing it, there was really something there. He's the most practical guy ever. So I was like, yeah, we saw something.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yes, it was weird.
And what about you, Victoria?
I do not have anything to top that. I have been a field biologist for a whole lot of years, and I've seen some really weird stuff out in the woods, but not anything that I could actually say I was sure was a cryptid. I have other spooky stuff, but not.
Well, you can't be sure. That's the whole thing about cryptids.
True. Right. The shadow man running through the trees might have been a cryptid.
A shadow man running through the trees.
But I was just thinking more, shadow people then. I don't know, are shadow people cryptids?
I suppose people is under the umbrella of animal, right? So we could say.
Okay.
I have seen modern cryptozoology starting to talk about exaliens, extraterrestrials and stuff as cryptids, and I'm like, I guess.
Does it have to be terrestrial?
Or an animal? Is it an animal, or is it a phantom being? Who knows? That's a whole other thing. But hey. So you like the Jersey Devil, but have you been to New Jersey at all?
No.
The Pine Barrens of New Jersey?
No, I have not had the fortune of going up to New Jersey, the Pine Barrens, or any place else that is supposed to be cryptid infested.
So you don't think you've encountered one?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, like you said, you're not supposed to know. So maybe one has spied me before and just kind of stayed hidden behind the trees.
No unusual
or
smells or
nothing.
Strange calls in the night.
Nothing that fun, unfortunately.
And Laurel, what about you?
I can't say that I think I've ever interacted with a cryptid, but I am deeply terrified of water, being in water. So I feel like it's one of those things, I probably never ran across anything actual, but in my mind, like a stick becomes a huge snake, you know, like you step on it. So I feel like I've felt and seen horrible things in the water, but I'm fairly sure I hallucinated all of them.
Well, I mean, that is kind of where they come from, right? So maybe you could start a new cryptid legend.
Never going swimming again.
Yeah. So, as I said, I'm a complete dork. So I started looking up, San Antonio area cryptids, right? And of course, Chupi, good old Chupacabra, that's coming up. La Lechuza, which is an owl monster, said to be in Southwest Texas.
The owl lady, yes.
You know about that one?
Oh yeah. I actually, so I've never seen a cryptid, but my partner here in the front row, her mother has a story about being chased by Lechuza at some point.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and do this a little unorthodox. So, ma'am, I would definitely like you to share, if you don't mind, your story.
My mom and my dad used to work at the Levi's factory on the south side of San Antonio, and they used to work overnight. So every night for weeks, while they were driving home down Military Drive, if everybody's local, they would come up on this hill where the old Kelly Air Force Base was, and the thing would start chasing them, kind of flying over their car. And my mom is very Catholic, so immediately she would get her holy water and start praying, and at a point it would stop chasing them. And once they got to a certain point in the road, and so for many weeks this happened, and I believe her because she experiences a lot of different, I don't know if it's supernatural or whatever, but I believe her. And I've actually seen one. My cousin and I were very young and dumb, and we went over towards some of the old mission roads, and it was very dark, and all of a sudden a big, huge, white bird tries to right in front of our car and turns, and we both kind of pretended that it didn't happen, but we were both very scared, and we headed straight home after that.
Well, how big do you think it was?
It was huge. It was a big, big bird. Like, I've never seen a bird that big.
Was it Big Bird?
Yellow.
Wow. Okay. So you've got family experiences here. That's awesome. Anybody else in the audience had an encounter with a cryptid? Everyone's like,
Anybody wish they had had it?
we all have. Yeah, we all have. Oh, wow. So that was awesome. That's just a good segue there. Dang. Jackalopes, right? So the Jackrabbit Antelope. I never found that one to be scary. But maybe I don't know that much about jackalopes.
Rabbits are terrifying. Are you
Rabbits
kidding me?
are terrifying.
Oh my gosh, I'm so terrified of rabbits. Like, really? That just saying rabbit anything, I'm like, I don't want no parts of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's subjective cryptozoology, right? It's like, well, what is actually scary to you,
Exactly.
And then, then we've got, so speaking of big birds, right? So I'm backing you up here, sister, because it says that in 1976, these school teachers noticed a 15 to 20 foot wingspan big bird. It looked like a pterodon, like those dinosaurs in San Antonio. So I don't know, maybe you saw that. Maybe. And then I also, I'm going down the rabbit hole. It was reported again in 2013. Wow. And then a man says he killed a Bigfoot in San Antonio in 2012. And he killed it by luring it with ribs he bought at Walmart and rubbed with a secret ingredient.
It's always the ribs.
Brought in the
Always
Bigfoot
the
and it
ribs.
was slayed. I don't know why that didn't make CNN, but it didn't. But I wonder what the secret ingredient would be that would draw in a Bigfoot. Any ideas?
I think that ribs would bring
Just
in
ribs in
regardless
general?
of, yeah, so
See, but
I
when
assume Bigfoot might be the same.
you start talking to folks about what the secret ingredient is here in Texas with barbecue, we take that very seriously. He is never telling what that ingredient is. He is
That
taking
is true. That
grave.
to the grave.
He is dying with
Yes.
it.
Yes.
It could be chocolate.
It could be anything, but he is not telling.
Well, in in Texas, we try our barbecue without sauce first. So maybe he tried with a regular rib and was
Right.
like, no, I got
Like
it.
dry
It's not
rub.
gonna
Gotta go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I will say that the person who shared the Bigfoot story in Florida with me, they would lure them out of the woods with jelly donuts.
Oh, wow.
That was like the way that they would make contact.
I can see
Bigfoot
that.
always looks so healthy.
I mean,
I know that surprises me.
you could lure me with a jelly donut. I mean, I
I
can appreciate that.
Maybe his
Ribs too.
metabolism, it just doesn't matter to
Ribs
him.
too.
Yeah.
That's cheat day.
Yeah, or that. You know what? That makes sense.
They only lure him out on cheat day.
He's like, finally, not all protein all the time. Somebody's got me some carbs and some
Yeah,
sugars here.
Bigfoot seems pretty ripped, but I know you do have to carb load sometimes on that. So, which cryptid do you wish really existed? I mean, which one is like you want so bad to be substantiated that this thing is real?
Loch Ness monster, any of the monster, any of the lake monsters, you know, anything with long neck and the nice humped back and the flippers.
Why do you really want that one to be real?
I think Nessie was my first cryptid. Like everybody's got their gateway cryptid, I guess. It's like, oh wow, oh my God, there's things we haven't discovered. I think it's just the concept that there are these. I mean, I love water as opposed to water. I just love the idea that there are these depths that don't have megalodon necessarily because they're freshwater, and they just have creatures that are enormous that we don't know about because they're murky and inscrutable.
Well, yeah, that's a good one. I have to say that might be my first love. That or Bigfoot of cryptids. Yeah. Yeah, and you're like, no, none of them. None of the above.
I'm like Laurel. I love looking at water, being around it, but anything in it can stay in it. No thanks.
Yes.
I love the idea. I love the idea of the Wendigo, simply because there are the ideas that all these other cultures, right? Like most cultures have this talk about a shape-shifting being, a being that is able to change form, but also there's the idea of and I guess I'm really dark natured, that I like the idea of that judgment. Right, like that whole I'm gonna look into your soul and I'm just gonna eat it, right? Like, have you read any of my writing? You know, I'm always talking about folks eating stuff, right? And so it's like, oh my gosh, because you could just tell that, you could just take that soul and, man, I got somewhere you need to be. Let me send you down the road and go check them out. So I love that idea that there is a being that could do that.
Yeah, and skinwalkers, Navajo
Yeah,
skinwalkers,
exactly. I
and,
love
having
that.
a human morphing into a deadly creature, and
Yeah.
it's just awesome.
Yeah, well, and it's just, I think that what I find the most intriguing is just that all these cultures, so my husband is Honduran, and he talks about the idea of shapeshifters. So they have the story of, you know, like the woman with that can shapeshift into a pig, and then she's, you know, you cut the pig's foot off, and then she's missing a leg the next, I mean, I'm just like, that cannot just be all stories. There's got to be some truth to this because they span the whole globe.
Pig woman.
Yeah, it's gotta be something. Yeah, I mean, shifting into something like, why not?
That's interesting. Huh? You guys? What do you think? Which ones? Which ones do you want to be real?
Maybe it's just a regional thing, but I think it would be cool if the Hellier goblins were real. Just because, like, I find, you know, so I'm from Kentucky. I've grown up there. I've toured a lot of caves. You know, we've got all these like underground mines and stuff like that. I actually work in a law firm that we have an environmental section, so I'm very familiar with like things that people sue you for that you do underground. And I just find the depths just very disturbing. You know, it's just so far below, and I feel like in a lot of way we've drilled and mined past a place where maybe we're supposed to be. And I feel like, that it's that either that or like the Tommy knockers, which are, they were the ones who would like knock to warn the miners if something was going on. And I had heard a story that there was actually a mine, I don't think it was in Kentucky, I think maybe it was West Virginia, where they laid everybody off at the mine, and the miners made the owners give pink slips to the Tommy knockers so that they would know to leave. And I just think that relation, and particularly when you're doing something for a living that is that dangerous, and you have to rely on something outside of yourself, the idea that there's these things under there, and would they help us? Are they annoyed because we're kind of knocking into their realm? I just think it's very, I don't know, it's dark, it's creepy. I think there could be a lot down there.
Yeah, Johnny, what about you?
Not to just be plugging Laurel's book, but the Mothman, just because I think it maximizes the mystery that can be rolled into a cryptid. It's not just a monster, it's intelligent, and it's not just intelligence, it's at a level of intelligence that is seemingly incomprehensible to us, and we don't even understand how it would operate or why it would do what it does, but we could presume that it would be smarter than us based on the decisions it's making, but at the same time doesn't have our best interests in mind, which I guess probably it doesn't make sense for me to want that to be real, but at the same time it does reinforce or just kind of carries over into things I would want to be real, things I would hope to believe in, a higher level of intelligence and something that's above us on a certain way, and that we might not be able to understand its morality or its line of thought, but at least knowing that there's something beyond us would be, I think it would just make life more fascinating, if a little bit potentially scary.
Well, yeah, and then we have the UFO connection, the UFO activity that was going on around the Point Pleasant area at the time, and Ingrid Cold you brought up, and all those like encounters with beings at people's bedsides, and there was all kinds of stuff going on with the Mothman legend. That's
it's
like
predicting
not
the
just
future
this monster.
and
well, and that's one of the questions too. Is it predicting the future, or is he a huge dick and just like collapses a bridge?
That's true.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Or it just could be a coincidence.
But he shows up and talks about it.
The Mothman shows up and talks about it?
Well, maybe
he's like gives the warning about the bridge collapse or whatever.
But maybe he just goes everywhere and just warns about bridge collapses, hoping that one's gonna
happen.
You don't know. He's got to be right eventually.
Yeah, he's like, I'm just going to go town to town and just keep saying, hey, your bridge is going to collapse, your bridge is going to... Then what happens? And he's like, I told you. And nobody knows about the hundreds of others where he was wrong.
And if you're vague enough, it's like, some people will die.
Yeah.
And it's, he was right, my God.
This is a fascinating version of the Mothman we've created here. The guy who's pretending to be mysterious, but really he's just lucky, just every once in a while guessing something. Right. A little bit, yeah.
He just wants somebody to notice him.
Well, he's like the psychic reader of the cryptids, right? Like eventually you're going to get something right about the person, right? No matter what. So yeah, I think it would be interesting the ideas of monsters, cryptids, can't say monsters, that's another panel. Cryptids, if they did exist, maybe they would hurt us. Maybe, what are their intentions? Why are they here? I mean, that's, such an interesting part of it. And I think, it would be fun to be prey once in a while, right? Just a little. Just a day, pray for a day. So what cryptid do you think, if it was real, would do the most carnage to human beings? Choose wisely. I want maximum carnage. What do you think? Anyone?
I mean, I know that we have a love of the Wendigo down here at the other end of the panel, but I do think the Wendigo has a lot of capacity for damage, just like you mentioned, the shapeshifter quality of it. It's eternally hungry, pretty savage, voracious, and that's another cryptid actually that I've been fascinated with for a long time. So I've got to track down what you've written there and read that for sure.
Same, yeah. Actually, where is that? Go ahead and make that announcement because I want to read it too.
Yeah. Okay. So it was on a podcast, on the Nightlight podcast here in February.
Yes.
Oh yes. So you could probably listen to it there. First.
Fantastic.
Yeah, but it's also in my upcoming collection too. So yeah, it's pretty gory because exactly that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's the idea that it not only like consumes your body, like, but your soul too. Like, no crumbs left. So I'm with you. That's maximum carnage, man.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Anybody else have a choice for the most carnage?
I'm just thinking of the fact that when we talk about cryptids, how few actually do attack us. I mean, like Nessie is this giant plesiosaur concept which would eat you if it was real and you were there, but we never hear about Nessie or any of the other lake monsters being threatening, and really Bigfoot stories are typically more of like an inadvertent interaction. They aren't like hunting.
Right.
So that's interesting. We make up not monsters, but monsters and tell stories about them, but we aren't saying we feel threatened by them. So
Yeah, not all the time. And I know that like on the cartoon panel, you had brought up Weekly World News, you know, which is always like, and we know that's true, right? I mean, that's Bible. So, but you know, I had Bigfoot's baby, you know, there's like the Bat Boy. I mean, like, so I don't know. I mean, I don't know if the Bigfoot baby was consensual. I have no idea. Didn't really want to get into that. But yeah, you're right. Like also maybe that gives a little bit more on the, if you're a skeptic, right? Maybe that gives you a little bit more credibility, for lack of a better word, that they don't ever attack people. And like there isn't people who are substantiated to have been attacked by a cryptid, right? So people like will come and they'll have, you know, maybe they have scratch marks or there's something going on with them and they say they were attacked by a cryptid, but we don't know.
Right?
Yeah, well, there's also the idea that in order for the mystery to be maintained, they really have to leave well enough alone. Right? Because honestly, you know, I have, again, I'm a native Texan. I have uncles that I'll just laugh about. Now, they would go and get whatever critter falls into the trap and put it on the pit. I mean, so you got to think about, like, if they were making themselves known, then, you know, nobody would leave them alone. So they would not be able to hide, really. So I think that they probably have the best idea that if they're around, don't let us know about it, because somebody's going to,
The Mothman.
they're gonna out you, right?
I know, he's back.
Oh my God, see, that is creeping me out.
It could be. So part of the Navajo skinwalker legend is that if you talk about a skinwalker, that a witch will put one on you. So maybe I just screwed us all by bringing that up and this is what's happening, but I'm not really sure. They're like, oh, a bunch of horror writers are gathered. Let's get them. Let's get them. I don't want to be in your next anthology.
and somebody doesn't want to record it, they're like they're going to totally cover all the recording. So
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay, so when it comes to cryptids, why do you think people are so fascinated by it? Why do you think that these legends have been around for so long with I won't say absolutely no proof, little to no proof of their existence? So where do you think this fascination with cryptids comes from? Because I mean, it was probably in the 90s. We had all of these television shows about cryptids popped up, like Monster Quest, and then there was Expedition X in the more recent past. They're all terrible. I tried to watch them again, like to get prepared, and I'm like, I watched the shit out of Monster Quest. Did you guys watch that?
I didn't watch that one.
Oh, but it does not hold up. It's terrible, and it's just like, but they all end up with the same conclusion, which was the same conclusion you had before you watched it, which was
Yeah.
So why do you think people keep coming back to cryptids? Like, is it because it's local? Is it tapping into our psyche? What's happening?
Well, most of them, honestly, I think as humans, we're just nosy. And so when we're confronted with something that we can't explain readily, like we come up with these other explanations. And so we kind of say, well, I mean, you know, I don't know why, you know, the cattle were slaughtered. I mean, you know, it could be a, you know, cow serial killer, but we're not going to think about that. We're going to say it's Chupacabra because it's a lot easier to do that, especially if we can't come up with the real answer. Like if we can't find a culprit, it's a lot easier to pin it somewhere else. So we can say, hey, there's something big in the water. It could be trash because we're nasty, but no, that's not what it is. It's gotta be the Loch Ness Monster, right? Or no, you can't have beat up those trees out there. It couldn't be us. It's gotta be Bigfoot. So I think we just like to have an explanation or sort of a scapegoat for things that we don't understand all the way.
And I think there's a real sense of place sometimes too. You said, like, is it in our culture? It's like, Nessie and Loch Ness, and in Florida it's the skunk ape. And skunk apes, they in Florida they are known, they live in the swamps, and especially in the Everglades, and they smell terrible, and they can run faster through a swamp than any sort of animal or person should be able to. And it's just people who are from that area, that's a huge connection. You're very connected to where they live. And so I think this becomes part of the stories we tell, not just the human stories, but like of our surrounding area.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's also, I feel like it's kind of like a last frontier kind of a thing. There's an exploration element to it. And I feel like it's one of those things, I feel like maybe the people who get really obsessed with wanting to find proof of Bigfoot or Megalodon or anything like that, it might be because they've seen an inkling of it. There's something that they couldn't explain. They want to, and again, and sometimes it happens with people who are pure skeptics, because it is very easy to set aside the experiences of others because we've all seen it. People think that they have this interaction, and it turns out, someone's worrying about whatever, thing that it wasn't. Because I feel like in particular now, there's almost this way of looking down on faith in something like that. It's like, by virtue of having faith in anything that we can't explain, it's maybe a little bit to be mocked in some ways. So it's, when you see something, like, and I'm more of a ghost person myself. I'm very much more of like a ghost, like supernatural type of person. And there's a lot of like ghost hunting shows and stuff. And it's the same thing. It's a green screen pointed at themselves, and they're going, "Did you see that?" And it's like, no, because we're looking at you. It's nothing. We have no proof. But I feel like once you have experienced something like that, if you see somebody, if there's a big bird creature following you home, there's maybe part of you that wants to say, like, okay, I need to explain this. I need to know I'm not crazy. I need to connect with other people who are doing it. So in some ways, I feel like it's, it's that kind of thing. You get your nails under it and you want to just keep going.
Yeah, I agree with all of the above. And I think it also ties into why we like to tell and read scary stories for as long as basically stories have been around. It's other than, some of them like the jackalope, although rabbits can be scary.
Hey,
especially
watership down. That's all I gotta say.
A rabbit with antlers too, so it's got extra sharp bits coming out of its head. So understandable why that could be scary to some people. But I think there is a reason why cryptids are pretty consistently something at minimum mysterious, oftentimes threatening, menacing. There aren't a whole lot of cryptid stories about something fluffy and delightful and happy. And if Bigfoot stories are not really about Bigfoot in the woods, being friendly and leaving you presents or anything like that. It's always something, at least a little bit of an element of, if you see this, you're at least going to have to make sure that you're paying attention, you're being mindful of your surroundings. This could turn dangerous. And I think that we just like that element in our lives, and we want to believe in some of these things. As much as life can be dangerous outside of, any other stories we can tell and things that we can't prove. We have plenty of danger that we can prove in our lives, but we always want to incorporate something that is unknown and uncertain, but still also a little bit threatening. And I think cryptids satisfy that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm honest with you guys. I wanted to be a cryptozoologist ever since I was a little kid. I'm like, I want to believe. Yes. Maybe not megalodons, because I have a degree in marine biology, so I can't really, with any academic prowess, say that we probably would have run into them by now, right? So that kind of like brings up, like, if you do believe cryptids might exist, shouldn't we have run into them by now, right? So it's like they're always saying, well, we haven't found any Bigfoot corpses, or we haven't found any scat, and the big bird didn't poop on the car, and so like it can't work that way, but there are actually parts of the world that are very, very desolate still. They're very like unexplored areas, And so, like, there were cryptids that have been proven to exist. It's happened. The mountain gorilla was a cryptid. We were never proven to exist. Then they finally were. Now we all are like, mountain gorillas. Yeah, of course. Giant squid is another one. The giant squid was just something that was like a legend, and you know, maybe people have spotted from time to time, but now it is proven to exist. You know, so it's like, that's fascinating to me.
And that's why you don't go in the water, because that shit's real. It'll fucking touch you.
But I mean, and the giant squid is gigantic. It's like 100 feet, could be 100 feet long from the nose to the tip of the tentacle. So it's like, how did we avoid that for so long? Well, I mean, we weren't exploring the deep water, right?
Right.
So if we actually went into these desolate, uninhabited areas, we might find some stuff, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
for sure.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I also think, like you said, there's a lot of places that are desolate. We sometimes, living in civilization, underestimate how easy it is for something to remain lost. People get lost in still wanting to be found and go missing all the time. So something that ostensibly at least maybe doesn't want to be found so much, maybe, you know, cryptids are a little bit smarter of an animal and they see how we treat all the other animals and they're like, you know, Bigfoot, if it's relatively intelligent to a little bit, maybe it's like, you know what, I don't want to be found by you guys. I've seen what you do to everything else. I'm going to be over here. They're as scared of us maybe as we're scared of them. So there's lots of different ways to at least look at the possibility of why we haven't discovered them yet. And like you said, there's a lot of terrain that we haven't really covered, especially in the oceans. Sorry, Laurel.
Right, so the megalodon could exist. I mean, I'm really like going back and forth. This is emotional for me. But I mean, I kind of don't, like, I believe, but I don't want them to be discovered because it takes away the mystery of it, right? And this is a mystery that I've been in love with since I was a little girl, right? And it's like, oh my gosh, like if it's actually come to fruition, number one, it would be put in a zoo, or it would be killed, or it would be dissected, or something terrible would happen to this creature, you know. And then also the mystery's gone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of hope there.
Sure.
I mean, there's this hope that something's surviving despite us.
Yes.
Exactly.
You know?
I love that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we haven't pillaged everything.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Not
that's the hope.
everything.
Okay, cool.
Well, there's also the idea, though, that as far as cryptids, when we start talking about the supernatural or spiritual beliefs, there is like, well, I mean, not to be like, you know, Mistress Obvious, but if we don't believe in those practices or those, then we're not going to find them, right? Like you have to be, even if you're a skeptic, there has to be some level where we understand that there are things that we don't understand spiritually, right? Like, and if you're not there, then you're not going to see those things anyway. So those are always going to be able to hide from a lot of people.
Agreed.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're going to end probably in like 12 minutes so people can go to the next reading, which is one floor down. But I want to open it up to any questions you guys might have. So any questions from you guys about, or anything you want to talk about? Get off your chest. Admit to.
From a cryptid standpoint, or just in general?
Yes, sir, in the back.
When it comes to writing fiction and using cryptids as a jump off point, do you feel like you need to stick to the actual legend itself, or is it okay to kind of rewrite it for whatever purpose you want and reinvent the legend?
Good question. Anyone?
That is an excellent question. So yeah, so Wendigos it's too hot here for them, right? Like they're usually up north where it snows. And so of course, in my whole, you know, little country ghetto Wendigo story, it's here in Texas. So I mean, you have to, I feel like there are certain things you can stick to, but if I had to just deal with just Texan heat, I don't know what I would be able to write about, right? There's nothing left, everything melts. So I think it's totally okay to kind of play around with. Of course, doing research and so that it's obvious that that's what you're doing, right? Like, don't just say, well, I'm going to talk about the Yeti and not explain, well, what is he doing here? You got to kind of, you know, you give a little nod, but I think it's totally okay to play around with these things.
Yeah, the new trend is San Antonio Yeti fiction. Actually, I'm down with that.
Yeah.
And I think, I think like you said, you kind of, okay, you're adapting it to your place. So if you say Bigfoot in a story, people have a certain set of characteristics. So if you make, or if you give it a Yeti and it's covered in white fur and it's in Texas, maybe people aren't going to be able to sink into your story. So I think if you adapt it with the idea of it's set, it's in its setting and it's behaving in a different way because of its setting, I think that actually makes it an even more exciting story. It makes you think, oh my gosh, maybe what I thought before, it's not that limited. Maybe this thing is much more expansive than I thought.
Anything to add over here?
I think there's definitely something to be said for allowing yourself artistic license with anything like that. In large part because if we didn't, we'd all be regurgitating the exact same story. There's only so many ways it can be told if you're sticking with the original. And then, the other part is I tend to, even if I start out just trying to I am writing a creature feature, it takes all kinds of different turns and becomes a Hightower story. So I feel like that's the sort of thing, it's what I love to see is somebody take on a cryptid or an element or anything like that, and how do you make that your story? How do you weave that in? How do you make them interact in a different way? One example is I live in Kentucky. I'm real near Waverly Hills Sanatorium, and never been there, which is very shameful. But I think it's such a cool place, and there's so much craziness around it. And I would love to see somebody take that and write it and make it theirs and make it fictional and make it something that we can have a jumping off point. The thing that people say, ooh, a book about Waverly Hills, and then it goes completely off the rails. That's what I would love to see. So I think it's not only good to do it, it's almost in a way it's sort of incumbent upon us so that we can keep, expanding these things.
Yeah, I agree on all fronts. I think the only thing I would add is also just if you are wanting to stick a little bit closer to research, don't just stay in the shallows. A lot of interesting stuff can be found if you dig a little deeper. Don't just, Google has kind of become a poor resource in a lot of respects for when you're looking stuff like that up. So check your libraries, check for whatever kind of older books you can find. Like I said, the book that I read about the Jersey Devil had a lot of other monsters in it, and it was, written for grade school children, but it provided a jump off point for me to read more about it. But that's from the 80s. If you were to Google that right now, you wouldn't find anything about it. And even though it's for grade schoolers, it has information in there about the Jersey Devil that I haven't been able to find in some of the other resources. So you can make old things new again, especially if they've become old enough now that people kind of have forgotten about them and they've been replaced by maybe the more regurgitated stories, like Laurel mentioned here, and people have kind of told the same things over and over again, the newer version. You can find something in the research a lot of the time for Bigfoot that goes back to earlier times and present it in a way that people are going to think it's fresh and maybe straight from your imagination, and really it's just because of the hard work you put in to do the extra research instead of just the surface level stuff. So there's a mix and match you can employ there that I think can really create something that is your own, like they mentioned.
Yeah, I've made up a cryptid. I don't know if you guys have done that. I wrote a story about a cryptid that is in an area in Austin. It's like a little creaky area, and so I just kind of took that setting and I decided to make a cryptid in it. And so I had to make that up from scratch and put the legend behind it, where did it come from and stuff. So that was a fun exercise to create your own, just make it completely up, and yeah, so that's what I did. I'm not touching the real cryptids because that's okay, except the megalodon. All right. Yeah, that might be coming. I actually might be putting out a shark porn book, so don't look at me for any sort of morality or judgment. Yeah, good question though. That was cool. And what else? I saw someone else motioning to say something. Oh, we got a mask coming off. Yeah.
Okay.
Learn a little about the local lore, and find that it tends to be around these areas that people already define as mysterious and dangerous. And New Jersey is a publication about
they're like living omens, kind of, or arbingers. I like that idea.
Did you say that was an endless water hole?
Oh, it's your favorite.
You didn't expect this to turn into the
Worst thing I've ever heard.
the aquatic
A
horror
lot of
panel,
emotion
didn't you?
in this panel.
There is. When
Oh
you
my
realize how
God.
you're gonna die, you're just like, oh.
Exactly.
So what did you say was the name of the publication to check out? Weird New Jersey. Okay, definitely, yeah. The Jersey Devil is one of my faves too, so I'm definitely gonna check that out. Yeah. Anything else, you guys? Yes.
So like with Mothman, it seems like that's the only cryptid that actually has another type of phenomenon associated with UFOs.
Yep.
Injured cold, all that stuff. Why do you think that is? I mean, other than the fact that Mothman flies. Because I mean, the Jersey Devil doesn't fly.
Yes.
Allegedly.
Oh, we don't know.
Not really. There's more so potentially like supernatural or mother leads might have been like some kind of a deal with the devil and her kid came out as the Jersey Devil that way, or it could just be a kid who was. That's another cool thing to me about cryptids is that a lot of the time you get into the lore and there's like all these branching paths. So with the Jersey Devil, there's a lot of different branching paths. To your point though, Mothman is a little bit more, not a little bit, a lot more strict of a path in its history because there's so much tethered to it directly related to a real life disaster. But Laurel, I mean, you're the I don't want to put you on the spot as the queen of Mothman here, but
Well, I think that's a good question because I did find it very interesting. If you've not read John Keel's book that stemmed all that about and I'm just going to call it True Life because I've read it and I believe he tells everything that happened and I think it happened. I think it happened to him. Now, whether or not that has to do with perception or what might have been going on there, but I mean, I believe that these things happened. And when you drill down to it, Mothman is only a very small part of it. He's the most probably intriguing, but you have a lot of things, people getting radiation burns. You have people like essentially sort of like a Men in Black sort of situation where you have people showing up that have no business being there and make really weird threats, and inexplicably their clothes never fit. I don't know why that's the thing, but like he makes a point of saying like their pants are never long enough, and I'm like, okay, but so they have poor shopping sense, and they're but the big thing is they make a lot of threats. They make a lot of threats about not talking about it. They're like, oh, you've taken notice of this, now you're fucked, which is a really dick move. Because again, to me, this is like you've turned on a disco ball, you have like rave music thumping, and you're like, don't look over here, you fuckers. It's like I feel like it's like, why are you punishing us for looking at something you clearly were waving at us to look at?
Yeah.
So I think
try not to think of an elephant right now.
yeah. So I think all that plays in, and I think that to your point, Mothman does, and to the point of your question, I think just piggybacking on that, I think Mothman is more of an extraterrestrial story, but because of the physical nature of Mothman, it kind of bled over into cryptid, and that's what I think makes it uniquely, like you said, it's the only one that kind of has extraterrestrial elements, or not the only one necessarily, because I've read stories like Chupacabra could be potentially alien. You read some of these, and some of them kind of or tether that onto it, but you're right that Mothman is the only one that really blatantly has it, and I think it's just the physical. Most alien stories similar to that would have just had the little green men, and this one had one that just happened to look a lot like what we think a cryptid would look like, and the way that they describe it.
Yeah, it's like they have you have Mothman. It's like it's an alien creature. There's a society that's protecting you. And Mothman's like, screw you guys, I'm They're like, oh, you did not see a man flying.
See, that's another good point. He's running around like fucking with them. They keep trying to keep him under wraps, and he's like, whoosh, just shows up. Ha
In Keel's book, he talks about if you go back further, that they're perceived as angels and UFOs and angels and stuff like that as well. So there seems to be like a progression on how society perceives it based on what the popular consciousness
Absolutely.
at the time is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point. Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to wrap this up. So in 10 minutes, next floor down. There's going to be a couple readings, so definitely go check that out. And thank you so much to our amazing panelists.
Thank you all.
You guys are awesome. So have a great time. Go see the book vendors downstairs and buy some books. And thank you so much. Bye, guys.
Thank you all.
And thank you to our sponsors, Tom Deedy, author of Haven and the Clearing, Tindybris Press, an independent publisher of new weird horror from diverse and unsung voices around the world, Bucket of Blood Books and Records, Chicago's premier destination for new and used horror books and movies, Witty Books, an independent bookstore in Tulsa, Oklahoma, specializing in speculative fiction, small press titles, all things spooky. Find them online at wittybooks.com. My Horror Confessional, a horror movie podcast, Nightworms, a horror subscription service, Horror DNA, a horror website, Vic Carey, author of Thorazine Dreams, and Nightfire, publisher of books for the dead, the living, and everyone in between. Nightfire is the new horror imprint from the folks at Tor Books.
Live spooky, die spooky.
Rest in peace, Max.